Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this short video I'm going to give you an introduction to iOS. So, iOS is the operating system that runs on Apple's mobile devices, primarily the iPhone, iPad, and previously the iPod Touch. And iOS was originally introduced along with the iPhone back in 2007, and it was interesting and novel at the time because it was um, based completely off a multi-touch interface, which was very different to the other phones that existed at the time, and really ushered in this era of smartphones that we're all very familiar with now. The original version of iOS and the current version too was based on OS X, which is Apple's desktop operating system, which itself was based on Unix. And this is now known as macOS, but iOS was a flavor of it, as I said, specifically designed for mobile devices. Now, at this point, there are a couple of further variations. Um, there are watchOS, which runs the Apple Watch, is a sort of cut down version of iOS. It doesn't have the same set of features, so I didn't include that in the list. But there's iPadOS, which is a sort of superset of iOS, and we will touch on some of the elements of iPadOS in the unit, but it also adds additional support for pointer devices, for example, which iOS itself doesn't have. And then as of the last few months or so, we also have Vision OS, which is the operating system that drives the Apple Vision Pro. And this, you can run an iPad app in the Apple Vision Pro, but um, Vision OS also includes additional features for things like depth and also for 3D content, um, especially for the augmented or virtual reality features of the Apple Vision Pro. I want to give some statistics on the iOS platform just to give you a sense of the sort of scope and um, size of this marketplace. So currently there's 1.84 million devices available. Actually, this should say 2024. I just forgot to update the label. And interestingly, this is actually a little lower than it was last year. One of the things Apple has been doing recently is removing old abandoned apps. So anything that hasn't been updated or doesn't work correctly with their current operating system, they send notices to developers and say, you know, update your app. Otherwise, in a month or a few months' time, we're going to remove it from the store. And they've done that for 2.3 million apps. Uh, Last year, Apple paid developers 60 million. Interestingly, for 2022, that number was around 84 billion. So this has dropped down a bit, which I guess is reflective of the sort of global climate, financial climate that we're in right now. Apple distribute more than 4 billion apps each day through their data centers, and you might look at that and go, okay, that's 4 billion apps. Why is that so much bigger than the other numbers up here? This is obviously because for a single app, it might be downloaded onto uh, you know, thousands of different devices owned by different users each day, and also users often have multiple iOS devices as well. And the total number of active iOS devices, so this is the sort of marketplace that's or the user base that's available, is 2.2 billion apps as of January 2024. Another point that's worth noting is that iOS apps now run natively on the latest generation of Apple desktop and laptops, and these are the M1, M2 chips, what are known as Apple Silicon, and that's because they use an ARM architecture, which is the same kind of architecture that um, the custom chips that Apple builds that are in its iOS devices. So I want to talk about the architecture of iOS a little bit. It's a layered architecture. There's really 4 layers to it that consist of frameworks that operate at different levels. Um, and here, the lower levels, we're not going to be dealing with so much. This is things like the core operating system, services layer that sits on top of it, a media layer that's built on top of the services, and then ultimately Cocoa Touch, which is the highest level. Um, and obviously, as sort of this suggests, the higher levels are more abstractive. They use object-oriented approaches. The lower you go, the closer you get to um, rawer approaches for doing things like you know non-object oriented and some C-based interfaces and things like this. So let's talk about Cocoa Touch. This is the infrastructure and the key technologies. It's all things like multitasking, sorry, touch-based input, push notifications, and other high-level services. And this includes a few frameworks we'll be using. UIKit is what we'll be doing a lot of our work in, and then there's some additional ones. GameKit, MapKit, which we cover in I think week 8, and EventKit are some of these high-level frameworks. There's a media layer below this, and this is, as the name suggests, for dealing with graphics, audio, video. We spend a week covering these technologies, so you'll get a chance to see them. And this is things like AV Kit and AV Foundation, Core Graphics, Metal. Below this are some of the core services. This gives access to phone features, data management, iCloud, which is Apple's syncing service, application management, in-app purchases. We will work with a couple of these things. Actually, the top 3 here: core data, which is their preferred way of persisting information; core location, which is used for locating the device in space; and or device; and core motion, which is used for tracking its movement in space. And then CloudKit, which we will talk about but won't cover in the unit. And then finally, at the lowest level is the Core OS, and this is low-level features that deal with security, frameworks, sockets, threads, external accessories like devices. And this is Bluetooth, security, and other system stuff. We won't really be working with that. So the way that we write Swift and iOS apps is using Apple's IDE Xcode. This is the officially supported environment for doing this. You can download it for free from the Mac App Store if you have a Mac. It's not available for Windows or Linux. You have to do iOS development on a Mac computer. Hence, the lab classes we have in the unit are run in Mac labs on campus, and you also have after-hours access to these labs. And Xcode includes a code editor, an integrated debugger, interface builder, which is a graphical environment for constructing user interfaces. It includes an excellent simulator for iOS devices. Also, I should list Vision OS is another one that there's a simulator for. That's a little harder to simulate that environment. It also includes integrated help and documentation and deployment tools. And we will cover all of these as part of the unit. You'll get very familiar with using the simulator and interface builder and the debugger as part of the unit. And for the unit, we update it each semester, and the current version is Xcode 5.2, and that's targeting the latest version of iOS, which is 17.3. We'll probably get 17.4, and we'll probably get Xcode 15.3 pretty early in the semester, but we'll check that everything keeps working in those as we go. So the programming language is Swift. This is a language specifically designed by originally Apple, but now given over to the open source community, and there's a group of people that direct its evolution. It's called the Swift Evolution mailing list. And this is nearly 10 years old at this point. It first appeared in 2014. It was designed to be a faster, safer, and more concise language than Objective-C. We, an older version of the unit, many years ago used to teach Objective-C. Um, uh, Swift is much, much nicer, I can assure you. And the syntax of Swift is